I'm going to begin, Hakeem, with you. The cornerstone, I guess, of any supporting ecosystem is the collection of and the high-quality use of data across the value chain. As a major developer with Schneider and supplier of these solutions, what is the intrinsic value you see in value chain optimization through digital transformation, and what are the barriers you see for major adoption?
Yep. Everyone can hear me well? Perfect. So on the first part of the question, in relation to the intrinsic value in digital transformation, I'll touch on the why, actually, as well as the what. So it's no secret over the last few years, our industries faced really significant disruption, economic, social, as well as environmental. And if you look at it from this perspective, right, industries kind of facing a situation where, on one hand, we have to continue to fuel economic growth, while also minimizing resource consumption and really driving that push to net zero. Now, the way to do it is by fundamentally becoming more productive and starting to deliver more from less. And that's where they've started to see and really leverage digital transformation as a way to achieve this. Now, in 2019, McKinsey estimated the full economic value from digital transformation at something like $3.7 trillion. Right? So the potential there makes sense as to why a lot of these companies are embracing digital transformation. And from a productivity perspective, they estimated that manufacturers that leverage and embrace digital transformation could see a 10 to 30% improvement in throughput. So again, all right, it's a reason why a lot of these companies started to embrace this technology and invest. I think the estimated investment to 2026 was to the tune of $350 billion is what industrial companies will invest in digital transformation technology. Now, the flip side of this is McKinsey did a follow-up study on looking at how a lot of these companies have gone about doing it, and they found that 70% of digital transformation initiatives either fail or don't achieve the full business potential. So, a significant amount of wasted potential. And Bill touched on some of the topics within the people, process, technology framework, but delving into one in particular around technology, we tend to focus a lot when it comes to digital transformation on data in itself, and its creation, its utilization, and contextualization. And it is important. It has really fueled that transition from Industry 3.0 to 4.0. But when we delve down into what some of the challenges are, we also see that current control technology has also inhibited the ability to deliver that full potential from a lot of the digital transformation initiatives. And the reason the automation space or the OT space is important is it's really that link between the physical and the digital world. When we've leveraged industrial control software and AI/ML solutions or other Industry 4.0 technology to start to contextualize and transform data into real or into actionable insights, you need a control system to then transform that into that business value in the real world. And what we tend to find is the current nature of control technology, where it's fundamentally very closed, quite vendor proprietary, that nature or that closed nature is really inhibiting the full potential from a lot of those data-driven solutions from being implemented in the real world. And when we look at it as to why it's kind of evolved this way, right? Industrial control systems were really birthed 50 years ago with the creation of the PLC. Mm-hmm. And since then, innovation has largely been hardware dependent. Faster CPUs, more RAM, and so on. But we use effectively the exact same execution model since 1968. However, we know industry's changed significantly since then. We are investing a lot in AI/ML technology, industrial software, to leverage and deliver value from a lot of this data, but it's not really easily able to integrate with a lot of the actual control systems that we have to then translate that data into a process environment. So we effectively need really a paradigm shift in the control system side to deliver that end-to-end value. Automation systems of the future really need to be more open, more interoperable, more easily able to really integrate with a lot of that data that's there. And fundamentally, they also need to be more software-centric and really decoupled from the underlying hardware. So when you put these systems in place, you don't have to then change them and do a heavy amount of engineering through its life cycle. And if you get to that stage, then you'll start to see that that automation technology will start to really enable digital transformation rather than actually inhibiting it.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Jared, let me refresh the timer. I guess the theme for this session is really looking at and understanding the slower adoption of electrification and energy efficiency in Australia relative to other areas in particular you're focused on industry. I'd like to understand what you think are the unique contributing factors in Australia, what we can learn and adopt from international experience, and how do you think we can transform our current industrial base?
I'll just start
Three
off.
hard questions there.
Yeah, there's a fair bit
And you've got 5 minutes.
We'll start with energy efficiency first, and I'll start off with, we probably shouldn't be too hard on ourselves. Certainly when a lot of our factories were first built, and a lot of that was in the 80s and 90s, they were world class. Worsley Alumina in WA was #1 in the world for energy efficiency for many, many years. Our other alumina factories are still very good. They've been overtaken recently by the operations in Saudi. GrainCorp did a vegetable oil refinery a few years ago, and it was world class in terms of energy efficiency. Energy efficiency is often a function of how old the plant is and the percentage of energy used in the total costs. Notwithstanding what we just heard from Amory, this is world benchmarking, notwithstanding those step changes which can be made, which everybody seems to ignore. And then you say, okay, we've got a lot of factories out there built in the 80s and 90s, and why don't they approve, and why don't they have momentum with energy efficiency? And often this comes back to baselining and data. So many energy efficiency projects go ahead without a good baseline, without good data. And if you don't have that, we say what is measured is managed, but also you can't celebrate. You can't celebrate and have that feedback loop to say, this was a really good project. This clearly saved us a lot of money and we should do more of this. So cannot emphasise that enough, is that metering and monitoring part of things is a really missing element within Australian industry. If we look at electrification, to drive that forward, two main factors in that, and that is your gas to electricity price ratio and the utilisation factor. Utilisation factor is fairly inherent and you can't change that. That gas to electricity price ratio in countries like Sweden, where it's virtually 1-to-1, there's a lot of electrification and very widespread adoption of heat pumps. In Australia, you say, what's our ratio? That's a very difficult question to answer, and especially with how we're transitioning now as well with more renewables. On average, it's about 2.5, 3-to-1, which makes it marginal and okay and good on the whole for heat pumps. But that price of gas is so incredibly variable. There's still plenty of people, plenty of industry on $10 a gigajoule. There's a lot on above 20, and there's still more above 30. And so that ratio is very much all over the place, so it's hard to make generalisations there. One thing I will comment, though, is actually it's on the perceived gas price. And if we certainly noticed that when the gas price spiked in 2022, most people were looking at above $24. The interest in electrification there just absolutely took off. And then November 2022, I believe it was, said, right, $12 price cap. Interest in electrification completely dropped off there. So that perceived price, even though they didn't achieve $12, that perceived price completely changed it. And that we may see that as an outcome from a recent announcement of the gas focus as well. If we talk about transforming and getting this happening, this is about, often I think it's about Kickstarter programs, and you really take my hat off to what New South Wales government has done over the last many years in some of their programs. Metering and monitoring, supporting that at the moment and getting implementation out there right now, closing next month, I believe. Their compressed air program that they did yielded fantastic results. For a mere, I think it was $5,000 per site for auditing across New South Wales, the median site saved $20,000 a year, and likely to then kickstarted a whole industry where they now get audits done annually, and it's really happening, and the savings are ongoing there. And so there's programs like that that can really transform and kickstart things along. And so if we had some coordination, and we see from the NEPs the intent to have better coordination across states, I think that sort of thing is going to make quite a big difference there.
Fantastic. You're almost to the second. Anthea, we've talked a lot about, I guess, a technology-focused view at the moment, but in this sort of ever-competitive global industrial landscape that we're in, one of our major constraints in achieving any of this is really developing the workforce of the future. What do you think are the major steps required for this in Australia? And how do you envisage we will sort of track that progress over time and respond to changes in the global market in a timely manner?
Also a big question. Can't promise I'll run to time.
That's all right. You've got.
So Powering Skills organisation has been established with the immediate primary focus of understanding what are the skills that are required for us to transition efficiently, effectively and safely from a fossil fuel environment into net zero. Our initial focus is very much in vocational education and training, because we believe the majority of the roles that will get us there, the majority of the occupations, are in a licensed trade occupation, electricians being the largest occupation that we're focused on. If we look at the system as it stands, we're already in a situation where the vocational education system is at capacity. There aren't enough teachers, there isn't enough infrastructure for us to increase the number of people that need to be trained at the moment if we wanted to. So that's probably the biggest challenge that we face right now. If you couple that with the work, there's a lot of research and evidence being gathered in this space around what the workforce will need to be in terms of size and capability mix. Jobs and Skills Australia released the Clean Energy Generation report last October. It's on their website. I would highly recommend reading the summary report if you haven't already. But what that piece of research effectively did was looked across all of the industries in Australia to see what the workforce would need to look like if we were going to achieve net zero. So it included energy efficiency, it included green mining, green manufacturing. So the entire gamut for us to achieve net zero. We've got a lot of industrial decarbonisation that needs to happen. And what that report has forecast, they had a central scenario, and they're forecasting that to 2030 we'll need an additional 32,000 electricians in order for us to achieve the net zero targets that are set for 2030. On top of that, there's an additional 20,000 plus minus heating and refrigeration mechanics that will also be needed. So these numbers are massive. And if we've already got a system that is at capacity, what do we do to solve that? We've got some issues on the supply side in that we both have a labour shortage and a skill shortage. So we don't have enough workers, and we don't have enough workers with the skill set that we need. These workers come through a 4-year apprenticeship program, so there's a long lead time. On the demand side, we've got high demand for electricians, but really low demand for apprentices. And I think this is probably the second area that is required of focus on top of the vet sector capacity and capability is if we don't bring enough apprentices through, then we don't have skilled workers. And it makes me think very much of another problem that we face in the energy trades, where we only have between 2 and 5% of our workforce are women. So we're missing out on an entire, 48% of the workforce doesn't participate in energy trade roles. And to clarify, energy trade, when I talk about that, electricians are the largest grouping, but it also includes lines workers, cable jointers, HVAC, fridgie mechanics, electronics trades workers, but that's broadly the energy trades. And it's a similar thing. No one wants to put on an apprentice, but everyone wants a skilled worker. No one wants a woman to go on maternity leave, but we need a strategic pipeline of workers, and that means women having children. So I think one of the biggest things that's been identified that is also a critical, probably my third critical challenge, is how do we make these roles fit for purpose so that we can access a more diverse workforce other than young men. And I'd like to really clarify, with the volume of workers that we need, we still need as many, if not more, young men coming through the system. But we also have a whole market of workers that we are not visible to.
Thank you very much. So this particular session, panel session, we're another 10 minutes on. I'd like to throw to the audience, rather than listen to myself talk all the time, if there are questions that are from the audience for our 3 panel members. No one wants to vote and put their hand up?
I'm also happy to talk. I talked very much about the challenges, but I'm happy to talk about a few solutions as well. I think with the vet sector capability and capacity, as was mentioned by Bill, we're one of 10 jobs and skills councils. So there's 9 other organisations looking at other industry sectors like mining and automotive, digital, manufacturing, transport and logistics, and. And the model is really focused on cross-sector collaboration. And when we look at the digitalisation impacts within our workforce and the occupations that we're trying to understand how to skill effectively, we have the opportunity to collaborate in a way where previous models have not really allowed that. Previous models have really sort of put us as combatants against each other, whereas this model is very centred in cross-sectoral change.
What's the question over here?
Hello, James DiLiberto, CEO of AZO. I'm here with many of our industry partners and a few of our customers. And as we're listening to the comment just from you, Jared, just about energy management systems and energy monitoring systems, there's plenty of desire from a lot of the industrial customers to collect that data, to digitize and collect it. But a lot of the funding that has been around to help them do that has been fairly minimal and may only cost the actual measurement device. But the digital ecosystem is measurement, communications, IoT, data storage, and these things end up costing a fair bit of money, not because we charge too much for them, but because of all the stacking that you need. We probably saw in the building disclosure side plenty of metering required per square meter in mandatory disclosure, but didn't necessarily mean that in the building code you had to do anything with that. You just had to put the measurement equipment in the board. So now you have all these orphan measurement devices. So I guess what does your team think here about how we can help, besides the grants that have come out in New South Wales for $100,000 for energy management systems? Where's a national program to help people get measurement and verification ability and getting those tools into the hands of not only the customers, but groups like us and consultancies that are going to turn that data into actionable information?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I mean, I'd love to, we'd certainly love to see more of that. And I always find it funny, if you do a cost-benefit analysis when someone does metering, a request for metering, and you put that to the CFO and says, what value are we getting out of this? Oh, I don't know. And so this does require a lot of awareness and knowledge that this is the likelihood of the return on investment. And I think we need a bit more case studies and what have you built coming from that one, so there's at least more confidence. I'd also say that we need to see a bit more case studies on the leverage of that information, especially when I look at things like the transfer to heat pumps. If you consider when you're doing a retrofit project, the case is that the bad news is a retrofit project is very expensive. The good news is you can right-size things. And when you right-size things, you're saving hundreds of thousands of dollars here in this change. And I think we need to see a little bit more of that come into cost-benefit in the way of thinking, to say, this is not just about saving, if energy is 5% of our costs, this is not just about saving 5, 10, 20% of that. This is about saving 30, 40% of our CapEx that's coming up front. And I think we'll talk a bit more about like-for-like replacements, which is the absolute devil out there right now. But yeah, I think that's where we need to look at that, enable and package it up there. in terms of a nationwide program or something, yes, we need to build in more Industry 4.0 solutions. Yes, we need to see race, the likes of race, doing more programs and awareness and what have you. There is some really good things happening already. There's some great stories coming out for Industry 4.0 solutions. Companies like CIM, companies like LNX, Schneider are doing some great stuff there as well, obviously. We just need to get those stories and get some momentum, I think, and then we can start saying, well, here's the business case. You know, you put money, you put that $1 million of taxpayers here, this is that returns there with that confidence, and I think that will come.
Thanks, Jared. I actually am going to steal a question because, Anthony, when you were talking, you made me really want to understand and think a bit more about the enablement of women in the workforce, and thinking through, you know, even the well-known barriers that exist, even at primary school, in converting sort of, in that case, girls into the STEM-based careers. Really would like to understand and how you see what can happen to enable that, to really unlock that potential that you talk about, because we all know that that's significant, but we all know it's been a long-term barrier.
Look, absolutely, early education is critical for us. One of our initial projects is to look at the Certificate to Career Start and how that fits in a national perspective, but also how we can then work with secondary schools to encourage a deeper delivery of that Certificate 2. Now, it's a big investment for a school to make. It's a lot of resources, it's a lot of time, it's a very niche skill set, so it's not the easiest thing to implement. But I use the example, I've got 2 teenage daughters. My eldest chose her subjects last year. Admittedly, they're in Cath Ed, and they had 2 options for a trade pathway or a vet in schools pathway. One was beauty and one was business. Now, I don't have anything against those 2 things, but the way with which it was treated in that information session, it was a footnote, and it was we'll hold another session, you know, for half an hour in 2 weeks' time if you're interested. And it boiled my blood, because I think we provide this expectation that the university pathway is the pathway, and for some it is. But for many, having the opportunity to understand what a trade looks like when you're making those decisions early on is critical. I think the other component is the parents. We have a bad reputation, and that is something that needs to change. On the flip side, once you're in, you know, it's still a very difficult environment for women to work in. Even the basics, and it gets spoken about a lot, but there's often not even a toilet for women to access. Like, that's a really basic human right that we still haven't managed to solve. So it's beyond just the energy sector, and it's beyond just our role as the Jobs and Skills Council. This needs to be something that we look at as across all of the trades.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, my name's Judith Friedman. I'm from Sydney Trains, and I go against what you're saying because I work on the women's panel there, and we're so progressed much higher than you that we have day forums for school kids, including females we bring in, to show them what all the apprentices can do and all the rest. And it's very close to my heart that we do that out of our own time. And some of us women actually proactively go there. So it depends on the company you work with on whether they encourage apprentices or not.
Absolutely agreed.
And I can't take that forum you said, because that gets against my grain that we've got to be proactive.
Judith, it's a really fair point that you make, and let me clarify. The majority of electricians that are employed in Australia, if I look at just the electrical workforce, are employed in small to medium-sized contractors. So we know enterprise RTOs, we know the organisations like Rail, like QBuild, our energy networks that can build and control the environment with which that cohort operates in, have far greater success rates. So congratulations, and I respect very much what you're saying. Unfortunately, in the contractor workforce, we have employers who want to increase their diversity mix, but once they send their workers to a job site, you lose control of what that culture is. And that's where the ongoing sort of diminishing returns of all of the investment that we make in investing in women, and beyond that, First Nations people from that speak other languages, that's where the risk lies.
Thank you for that question. And we're going to have to wrap up there. Sorry, we could talk forever. Luke and my colleague Marg from RACE are going to now run you through the interactive session where you all have to provide answers now for the next 30 minutes, I think it is, Luke. So over to you.
Big
round sorry.
Yes. Do you have things you want to say?
Yeah, apologies. And thank you very much for Schneider Electric for sponsoring this particular session that we were on. This was a great session. Thank you very much for the speakers. And, you know, I appreciated the ability to get up here to bring those floor questions, and very interesting to see how, you know, we've got a range of outcomes and things to look through, from jobs and enabling women in the workforce to these large-scale sort of landscapes of change in visualisation. Anyway, thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to all the answers that come out of this session.
Big round of applause for Bill and the panel.